Hi kids, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza and today we are going to do the book recommendation tag. Why? Because I love a tag. I love answering questions. It's fantastic. It's kind of like a baby quiz you do with yourself, but it's not at all like that. Already talking nonsense. I've seen this going around. I've heard some really good books that people really haven't been talking about as much. Like people are kind of going back through their bookcases and pulling out things that they just haven't had a chance to bring up in book videos, just have kind of gathered dust on their shelf for a while, even though they're favorites, so they answer the questions perfectly. And I love a tag. I know that this book tag was originally started by a mostly romance booktuber. I think her name is Stephanie Bower. Probably saying that wrong. And if I am, I apologize. And I am an awful person. But it has been interesting to see. I've seen it go around kind of on the romance book community, but start making its way across other book communities as well. I love a tag. I love a tag. I love a tag. Who knows what I've even been talking about. Let's get into it. Instead of me just sitting here rambling, before you know it, I'll start telling you random stories. I literally have a video that will never see the light of day where I spend like 15 minutes talking about the stray cats in my neighborhood because I just got on a tangent. Couldn't stop myself. And watching it, I'm like, nobody cares. You don't even care. Why are you talking about this? All right, let's get into it. The first question, all of the questions for this tag will be listed in the description. If you are interested in doing it yourself, do it yourself. I want to watch it. I want to see you do the book recommendation tag too. I want to see everybody do it. I want to see everybody do this. I want to know all the answers. I'm nosy. The first question is, what book do you tell people is your favorite? I actually don't usually have to lie, although I will, because of what I do for a living, I am talking to people constantly, and as you know, sometimes you get really nervous when you're recommending people a book because, 1, their reading taste might be different than yours. 2, they might be judging you on your reading taste. And 3, if you tell them you love a book and they don't love it, it feels like a personal attack. A personal attack. It shouldn't. Everybody's allowed to have different opinions, but you know, it hurts. But I usually actually don't lie about this because I will tell everyone that my favorite book is Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This book I love this book. Is it perfection? No, but it's damn near close. I love it so much. It has so many things that I absolutely love. It has found family, it's a slow burn, it's a fantasy romance, it's more cozy and small. Let me tell you what this is about. So this is the story of Hala. She is a little bit older and a widow, and when her husband passed away when she was pretty young, she actually moved in with his uncle to be his caretaker. Now, his uncle was a very eccentric and wealthy man, and upon his death, he willed all of his fortune to Hala. Now, his family is not having this, and they've decided to try and keep the money in the family. They're going to force Hala to marry basically a cousin who is just unappealing and has very clammy hands. And then once they've married Hala off, they have nefarious plans for what will happen to her next. So Hala is locked in a room by these awful, evil people and awaiting her fate when she finds a sword that was one of the uncle's many, many oddities, unsheaths it, and a man pops out. Kind of like a genie in a bottle, but it's a man and a sword. Now, the man and the sword is Sarkis. He is the servant of the sword, and he has been the servant of the sword for a very long time. And it is his job, as the servant of the sword, to protect the person who is in possession of the sword. So he is now Hala's protector. Adventure ensues. Now, this is a much more lower stakes adventure, and that's why I usually call this like a cozy fantasy romance. They are going on an adventure from one town to the next, but this isn't about saving the world. It's not defeating a big bad. This is about saving Hala, one person from this fate that this nasty family has in store for her. They pick up characters along the way, and it's amazing, and I love it. I love it so much. This is a slow burn, and I also like to tell people, if you're not a fan of spice, this has got like just a dash, just a baby spice. You're actually not even in the room, you're in the room next door, if that even helps. But as someone who enjoys spice in their books, I was perfectly okay with the spice we got. This is so funny. T. Kingfisher does top-notch banter and just writes friendships and found family amazingly well. So if you're looking for banter and found family, T. Kingfisher, and my #1 rec from this author, Sword Heart. God, I love this book. The next question is, what book is your guilty pleasure? And although I don't ever really feel guilty about any of the books I read, I think it's weird that like there are certain books that you have to kind of like tiptoe into with people, and then you're like, are you interested in, oh, you also read this? Good, let's talk, let's be friends. But I get it, not everybody's gonna be into it. My guilty pleasure, even though I hate saying it that way, is going to be the Ristaverse series by Ruby Dixon. Now, if you have been on social media of the book variety for any period of time, you've probably heard of Ruby Dixon's other series, Ice Planet Barbarians. That one's a lot of fun. It's crazy. It's aliens and these women and aliens, but I personally love Ruby Dixon's other series, the Ristaverse. This series, although you should check your trigger warnings, just take care of yourself and check your trigger warnings before you hop into this. But basically the whole premise of this series is aliens go to Earth, kidnap women, and these women end up in horrible circumstances. They are sold for a variety of reasons, and most of them are not nice. And then these women are rescued and taken to a refugee planet that has been set up by an alien who just happens to be married to a human, to have a safe place for these humans to go because they can't head back to Earth. They can't take them there. So they need their own safe place. So they now have this refugee planet that is basically a farming planet where all of these women are kind of given just like a tiny piece of grass, and they're like, go and do some farming or something. Live your life. We've saved you or whatnot. Most of these women have been through horrible things in the past and are now trying to adjust to life on Rizda 3, which is our planet. Each story is a little bit different. There are actually a few in the series that don't take place on Rizda 3 but are still connected. I would say my favorites in this series are When She Purrs and When She Belongs. They are the two longest books in the series. In this series, basically, these women all have to find husbands for a variety of reasons. Many of them having to do with the fact that they are tiny little humans on a big giant planet full of scary aliens. And you know what would help out? Having a scary alien on your side, you know? But most of these stories end up being really, really sweet. Most of these guys end up being great big cinnamon roll, marshmallow-filled, just love monsters, even though some of them are a little bit crazy looking. Some of these books top out at like 70-something pages, while others are much, much longer. There's something in the Ristaverse for everyone. It's kind of a guilty pleasure because not everybody is into alien romances, but I love the Ristaverse. It makes me happy, you know? Question number 3 is a book that everyone loved and you didn't. And for that, I'm going to have to go with Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This book was the absolute longest wait I have ever had for an audiobook from the library. And every week I was getting an update that said, your library has acquired 5 more copies. Your library has acquired 10 more copies. I think my library has every copy. They have thousands of copies. They just kept getting them, and still it took months for this book to actually come through, and it was fine. It wasn't bad, and I don't want to say it was bad. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't. Everyone I've talked to absolutely rants and raves about how sweet and just heartbreaking and great this book was, and that's just not what I got from it. I honestly probably would have DNF'd it if it hadn't been an audiobook, and if I hadn't waited so damn long. I was waiting for something, some twisty twist or something. And I mean, there's twists. It's not bad. I just didn't love it. Not every book is for every person, okay? But there was an octopus in it, and so I had high hopes. The next question is, what is the book that you read the fastest? And for that, I'm actually going to have to go with That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. I picked this book up on a horrible, horrible day. It was a terrible, terrible, sad day. I plowed through it just in one day. And then the next day woke up and was still having a bad day from what had happened the day previous. And I picked that book up again and I read it all the way through again. When I did this, it was available on Kindle Unlimited. I haven't looked to see if it is still, because I know Kimberly Lemming has recently been picked up by a publisher. And even these books are getting new covers as well, which I think everybody's kind of upset about because the covers are kind of fun. but let me tell you what this book is about if you haven't heard. This is the story of Sin, or Cinnamon is her full name. She is a spice farmer, and one day she is in a festival in town, kind of stumbles home drunk, sees someone in trouble, and goes to help. But unfortunately, the person that she helps is a demon. Adventure ensues. Our demon, whose name is Fallon, is our love interest. This is a lot of fun. The bird is screaming right now. Nice, nice. I think we're done. Okay, this book is a lot of fun. It's super funny. All of the books in this series are super funny, and even though technically I guess you could read them as standalones, you want to read them in order because you're introduced to characters, and some of the jokes are just funnier if you've been there the whole ride. The first one is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, obviously. The second one is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf, and that one follows Cinnamon's best friend Brie, who is a cheesemaker, and the werewolf, Felix, that she accidentally yeets a love potion at. The third book, which is coming out next month, I believe, was originally titled That Time I Saved a Dragon? Or something like that, but the title has been switched to, no, it was That Time I Drugged a Dragon, and it has been recently switched to That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human. And I couldn't be more excited. I literally have an alert on my calendar for when that book comes out. But that was by far the fastest, not only book that I've ever read, but reread, just in a sitting, just plowed through that nonsense. And it was great, and I love that series. The next question is a book that needs more hype. And for that, I'm going with The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, and this is by Megan Bannon. I feel like when this book first came out, I was seeing it everywhere because the cover is beautiful. But then I don't feel like I heard anybody talking about it, and people need to talk about this book. I absolutely adored this. So how I would describe this is that movie, You've Got Mail, with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, but also there's gods and demigods, but also it's kind of a Western, and then there's zombies. I know that sounds crazy, but it's done so well. In this book, you're following, guess what? Heart and Mercy. Heart is our cowboy marshal type character in this fantasy world where he goes out into this magical area, realm, plane of existence, and hunts down these zombies. Then he takes the zombies to this undertaker whose name just happens to be Mercy. Her family owns this undertaking business, and so the bodies come to her, and she properly buries them so that they don't get up and walk around again. The problem is that Heart and Mercy had a very prickly first meeting, and now just kind of hate each other. Just kind of hate each other. But then one day, Hart is feeling really, really down. He writes a letter, puts it in a mailbox with no address on it, not sending it to anyone, thinking no one will ever read it, and it gets delivered to Mercy. And then You've Got Mail starts, and they become pen pals anonymously, not knowing that they're writing to each other. This is the kind of fantasy world I like too, where there's a lot of thought put into it, but there's not too much info dumping. You learn kind of how the world works through the characters and interactions and descriptions of places. This book, I picked it up just kind of, I think it was like on a Friday night thinking I'd read a couple chapters and then put it down, and it literally took over my weekend. I could not stop until I finished it. And at the very end, I was just sobbing, just crying so hard. And then you close the book and you smile at it and you want to read it again. I feel like this needs more hype. Why aren't you reading this? Why aren't you reading this? Hype. The next question is, what is a book is going to be becoming a movie or TV show soon? So I kind of cheated for this one, and I chose What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. But this actually isn't the one that's getting made into a TV show. The book that this is based off of is the one that's being adapted to a TV show, but it's being adapted by Mike Flanagan, the one who did The Haunting of Hill House, and I'm forgetting the name of the other one, but it was based on The Turn of the Screw. So he is adapting the story that this story got its inspiration from. This book is a creepy, 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 creepy tiny, how many times can I say creepy? It's so creepy, with an asterisk. I am incredibly affected by mold and mildew and fungus. It just, ugh, I barely can talk about it. It skeeves me out. And this is a book about mushrooms and mold and fungus and damp places that are super creepy. And so I was highly, highly affected by this. It's also T. Kingfisher, and I'm a fan, so I had to read it. In this book, we're following, if you can hear the bird, I apologize. She literally as soon as I start recording, she's like, now is my time. Scream my song. Go. The people want to hear me. People want to hear you. Anyways, this book is following Alex, I believe. They are a soldier that is returning to their friend's ancestral home because they've received a letter that their friend is dying. And when they show up, their friend is acting real kooky, weird, strange, and so is their friend's brother. There's another, I believe, is he a doctor? I don't remember who the other friend was. There's someone else there, and he is equally as confused by all of the things that are happening. The house is damp and gross, and the hillside is full of these creepy mushrooms, and it gets into the spooky bits real fast because it's got to get to them quick in the tiny amount of space it's got. But I really liked this. And I'm excited to see what Mike Flanagan does with this same kind of premise. So there you go. There's one you probably haven't heard about because I didn't hear about it until very, very recently. And I heard that they had to stop production for a little while because somebody got fired because they were being inappropriate on set. Drama. The next question is, what is a book that you have reread the most? And I'm actually going to skip this one. I don't really have a book that I have read the most. Or reread the most. I think I've only ever reread things maybe once. The only other thing I can think of is things that I read that were required reading that I have then since picked up, and I might have read them more than once, but I don't have an answer. So we're going to move on because I don't want to lie. A book from a genre. The next question is a book from a genre you don't usually read. The bird is literally just screaming. I had to go check on the bird. She was screaming this entire time. I was worried something was happening. Nothing was happening. She's just being a bird. The next question is a book from a genre you don't usually read. She immediately started again. The book I'm going to choose for this one is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This book is a memoir, and I'm not usually someone that picks up memoirs unless I'm incredibly interested or they've got a lot of buzz about them, but I still don't always enjoy them. But this book, poor Jeanette, she grew up with a mother who is narcissistic and a hoarder and using Jeanette to fulfill some fame fantasy that she never got to live. It's sad. Poor Jeanette. But the thing I will say about Jeanette is I listened to this on the audiobook and she is phenomenal. She is a great writer. She is a great narrator. And I hope we get more from her in the future. I hope she's doing okay. I hope you're doing okay, Jeanette. I'm worried about you, girl. Our next book is going to be, or the next question is, what is a book that deserves all the hype? You ready? This one. I will be taking no questions. This is the second book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. This is the first book. The first book is good. The second book is better. The first book is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. The second book is a Hades and Persephone retelling. This book had me in a chokehold, and I will not be taking any questions. Speaking of rereading, I need to reread this whole series because this book. Question number 10 is a book you usually recommend. For this one, this is a little bit hard because I feel like it really depends on who I'm talking to. Again, recommending a book to someone, it feels really like putting yourself out there. You have to know kind of what they like first, because if somebody only reads fantasy and you give them some thriller, it might go great. You might open their eyes up to something completely new and different. Or they might hate it and never trust you for a book recommendation again. So I usually try to get a little bit of a feeling for what the person likes to read. Now, if it is someone that is dipping their toes into romance or reads a lot more kind of literary fiction, I usually recommend Emily Henry novels. Those books are easily digestible, especially they're not super spicy. They give you all the emotions, but if you saw your mom reading it, you wouldn't be scandalized. So those are the ones I usually recommend for those people. If it's somebody that reads a lot of fantasy, The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I have recommended this series to so many people after it was first recommended to me by a friend. This, if you are into like fantasy, like not messing around fantasy, these books are so stinking good. This is the first book in the series, and in this book you are introduced to all of our characters. But the thing about this is it plays on a lot of the tropes of all fantasies. So you're being introduced to these characters. You have your berserker type warrior, your wizard character. You have another character that is the golden boy and a rising star among the military. You have a character who has been through some nonsense and she is practically feral. And then you have another point of view that is someone that used to be the golden boy and then was captured by the enemy and tortured, and now he's a torturer. You go into this series thinking you know who your favorite characters are going to be. You don't. You don't know, because throughout the series, a lot of these stereotypical characters get flipped on their head, or just the stereotype gets burst wide open. This first book is a lot of getting the characters to where they need to be for the series to start. This is like character stuff, but it's so stinking good. And by the end of the series, I was invested in my favorite character, and I was so surprised they were my favorite. If you were the least bit interested, they're hefty and they're dark. They're very grimdark, and bad things happen and everybody is messed up and horrible, but man, are these good. Next book I usually recommend to people if you are like a literary fiction, historical fiction type reader, or you are someone that hasn't gotten into reading or is getting back into reading, I should say, is kind of dipping their toes back in. I usually tell people to read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. There's a reason this book is so hyped. It is taking place in a old Hollywood timeline, but also you have a present day timeline where this Hollywood starlet that is obviously kind of like Elizabeth Taylor, but not Elizabeth Taylor. Obviously, her name is Evelyn Hugo, is finally going to give her life story to this reporter. And she is going to give all the nitty-gritty details about what really happened behind the scenes. She's had 7 husbands, and she is going to divulge which person was the actual love of her life. Evelyn has a very sad story. A lot of people around her have very sad stories. And the twist in this, it was good. It had me. So those are the books I usually recommend to people so that they come back to me again and ask for more book recs. Winnie is having a very loud dream in the next room. She's barking in her sleep. The amount of noise that is happening in this house. She's going to check on her because she's nervous because Winnie's barking in her sleep. She's just doing a good sleep is all. She's just decided sitting on Winnie's head would probably help. It's going great over there. The next question is, what is a book that has your favorite characters? And for that one, I am going with A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This book, our 2 main characters are sibling Dex and Mosscap, who is a robot. I would do anything for them. I would literally, did they need an organ? I've got 2 kidneys. I don't need both. I loved both of them. They are so sweet and kind, and I loved them, and I want to be best friends with both of them. This is the story of sibling Dex, who has taken on a new job as a tea monk, and they travel around to all of these smaller towns that exist outside of the one big city in this world. One day, when they travel a little bit farther out than usual, they encounter a robot. Now, robots have disappeared from civilization many, many years ago because one day they gained consciousness and they said, we're out, and they left, and nobody's seen them since. So sibling Dex is encountering the first robot. I also am very aware that I cannot say robot correctly. I know I say robot. I don't know why, but that's how I say it. I can't stop myself. I hear it coming out and I was like, no, say robot. I say robot. Sibling Dex encounters Mosscap, and these two are meeting each other, and this is the first book in a series, and I'm pretty sure they're gonna go on a sweet little adventure together, trying to figure out what humans really want from life, so that Sibling Dex can also know what they really want from life. Again, do you need a kidney? I will give it to you, either one of you. I don't know what a robot would do with a kidney. Probably nothing good, but if they needed it, I'd give them to. The next question is, what is a book that you would want to live in? And I'm going to have to go with Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I'm pretty sure everyone knows about this book, but if you don't, it is the coziest of the cozy fantasy. It is very slice of life. It is about an orc named Viv who moves to a very small town in a fantasy world and opens up a coffee shop. But none of the people in the town have ever heard of coffee before. She has to make friends and remodel the coffee shop and import the coffee beans and get people to come drink coffee. It is not high stakes at all, and it is lovely. And I want to live in this town and drink coffee at Viv's shop and eat the little cakes that our precious little mouse man makes. I want to go there. He makes just cinnamon rolls and they sound fantastic. So this is where I choose. If I could choose, I'm going to go live in Legends and Lattes. Number 13 is a book you loved that you thought you would hate. I'm going with Jane Eyre. I really, really loved this. And so far with a lot of my rereading of classic literature, I've just had a okay time. There hasn't been anything that I've just been like, I love this book. Until this. I love this book. I tabbed it. I tabbed it like a reader. I was highlighting all kinds of nonsense in here. I mean, I was just writing all kinds of stuff. I really enjoyed this. I will say volume 1, or the first half of the book, is far superior to the second half of the book, but still, Jane Eyre. Just classics, you know? And the last question is, what is a book that you wish you could go back and read again for the first time? And for that, I'm choosing this behemoth. This is The House of Earth and Blood in the Crescent City series by Miss Sarah J. Maas herself. Also, look at this monster. I think that is why I haven't reread this, because I actually do have the second book in this series and I haven't read it, because I know I need to reread this first, and it is an undertaking. But when I tell you that this book had me, I also, when I describe this book to people, it's almost like it's multiple books in one. The first, 300 some odd pages are one book. The last 200 some odd pages are completely another book. It works together. It doesn't feel disjointed. It's just like suddenly you go from one to the other and you are in it. This is the story of Bryce Quinlan. She is a half fae, half human, and she lives in a urban city full of magical fae and other creatures. A tragedy befalls some of Bryce's friends, and she is devastated, and then she gets wrapped up into the investigation to find out what happens. So the first part of the book is kind of a murder mystery, and the last bit just goes off the rails. I was sobbing at some of these parts. There's a character that we lose in this book that I did not realize I was that attached to until I was crying. This book, I wish I could go back in blind, because I feel like it was quite the reading experience. But that, kids, is the end of the book recommendation tag. Cheese was here for like 2 seconds, but the dogs, I guess, have decided that they don't want to accompany me into this video, which is probably for the best. I feel like when they're here, there's a lot of licking and fighting, and then there's just squeaky toys. But that was fun. I'm glad I got to talk about some books that I haven't talked about in a while, and I'm glad I got to talk about some books that I talk about all the time. But that's gonna be the end of this pizza party. I hope you're reading good books out there wherever you are, and I'll see you next time.